Hello, everyone, and welcome to the LFS podcast. This is the first episode. I don't know what we're going to be doing with this, but it's a podcast around 15-20 minutes every week where I'll be talking about some big stories, some interesting happenings around football, whether it be transfer news, whether it be some drama in the scene of football itself, or anything in between. Well, I'll be here to let you know, have a chat through the big stories of the week and any real interesting updates that we've got coming up for you from LFS as well. So, over the next 15 minutes, I'm going to be talking through, in today's first episode, the whole Gary Lineker situation and the drama that's occurred over this weekend. I'm recording this on Sunday afternoon, so some stories may develop over time, but this is the latest so far, and this is the latest information that has been really given to us really at the moment. So Gary Lineker, of course, has been putting out some tweets. He started on Tuesday putting out tweets about the UK government's migration policy, talking about how the language used, such as stop the boats and other phrases used by the UK government, saying that they were, in essence, similar to that of the language used in 1930s Germany. Now, the BBC has been kind of like measuring up where the public opinion is on this really this week, and they haven't made a definitive decision themselves really on how this has gone. But on Friday afternoon, it was kind of rumblings that Gary Lineker wasn't going to apologise. You know, there was clips of him coming out of his house, and he said he didn't regret the tweets. He didn't think that he's done anything wrong, and that he wasn't going to apologise for them. And later on Friday, around about 4 or 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon, he was pulled. He was pulled from the match of the day. BBC put out a statement saying that he wasn't going to be presenting the show this weekend until they have resolved the situation. Now, initially, their statement said that he had chosen to do so. So he had chose to step back for this weekend until a resolution was made. But later, there were reports that he was pulled off the air by the bigger bosses at the BBC, and that Gary Lineker hadn't, in fact, agreed to not be presenting Match of the Day this weekend. So that was really the big story of the day, is kind of like they tried to frame it in a way, the BBC, that Gary Lineker had agreed to this, when in fact he hadn't agreed to it, and the BBC had just making an executive decision on his presenting of this weekend's show, and that he wasn't going to be involved. Now, this, of course, has really caused a lot of drama and really caused a lot of anger within people and within pundits, especially at the BBC and around the media sphere in the UK and the sports media sphere really this weekend. Now, of course, it turned out that a lot of people back Gary Lineker in this situation, and not in terms of the fact that his point of view was correct or that they agree with his political views. That's not the point that's being made. It's the fact that he wasn't allowed to share those views on a platform that he is allowed to share his opinion. It is not bound by any BBC rules, and he hasn't used the BBC platform to do so. So the question really presented itself: why did the BBC have to get involved? They haven't got involved with many other cases involving some big names on the BBC that have made some big political statements. So, just to sum it up then. So, Lineker was pulled off air on Friday after the BBC said he breached its guidelines on use of social media. Now, then followed after he was pulled, a statement from Ian Wright and Alan Shearer, who of course do the punditry alongside Gary Lineker on a regular Match of the Day. They both said that they weren't going to be appearing in solidarity with Gary Lineker and the fact that he was pulled from this show. Now, a large number of presenters and pundits that work for the BBC or offer BBC Sports coverage over the weekend, some key names, Jermaine Genius, Alex Scott, Micah Richards, for example, all said that they weren't going to be appearing on BBC shows, or in fact, if they were asked to be the replacement for Gary Lineker on Match of the Day, that they would refuse to do so. Other people, such as Mark Chapman and others who present other BBC sports shows over the weekends, said that they would also not be doing it this weekend, and that was to show solidarity, basically, with Gary Lineker in this whole situation. So there's been a lot of real fallout, really, between the public opinion and the BBC, and the fact that the BBC has never done this before. So why are they doing this just now when it's a guy that isn't? I can understand if it's a news presenter or a political journalist or someone of that ilk, that at the BBC their political views will be a lot heightened, a lot more, because they have a political insight, really, and are kind of a voice of politics on the BBC. I would understand if there was someone like that came out and made a big statement and was very opinionated upon that, because, of course, journalism, you have to be impartial, and it's a big thing at the BBC, that whole impartiality thing. But Gary Lineker is a freelancer, by the way, and he's not a BBC employee, so he's a freelancer, and he's a sports presenter. He doesn't deal with politics, he doesn't deal with news, he doesn't deal with current affairs. He does not work for the BBC in that manner, in that format. He doesn't. So therefore, the question really stands is, if all of your presenters are bound by these guidelines and can't have opinions, then where do you go from there with the BBC? Because are they going to pick and choose who they're going to suspend? Are they going to pick and choose, oh, well, they don't follow our agenda, so are we just going to suspend them and possibly sack them because they've made a point upon, really, it's a factual point. If you look between 1930s Germany and currently what the UK government are doing, it's similar in its kind of approach of language to that of what was said back 90 years ago. It's not that Gary Lineker was making an outlandish statement and saying that they're Nazis or that they are trying to gas people or anything like that. He is saying that the language is similar to that of 1930s Germany. And when you look at it, he's actually right. You know, he is factually correct. And, you know, I'll come back to the whole apologising thing. You know, that was kind of the thing. They were trying to find a resolution in the BBC. And then the question surfaced, would Gary Lineker apologise for these comments? You know, a lot of people have been saying, you know, Holocaust survivors and families of those that died in the Holocaust and things like that, or during 1930s Germany, and that whole Nazi regime, will be offended by Gary Lineker's comments. But actually, it's actually quite the opposite. Personally, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen anybody complaining or really angry by Gary Lineker's comments. Anyone that comes from a non-biased point of view. If you've got a bias towards the government, you will have that point of view because you're backing a government policy and he is going against the government policy, so you're going to back the government if you've got that point of view. But from my point of view, personally, I think Gary Lineker's done nothing wrong. He shared his opinion. He didn't do it on a BBC show. He didn't do it on a BBC platform. He isn't a BBC employee. Nothing in his contract says he can't make those statements or say things about politics. The only thing that the BBC are going off here is their own personal opinion and BBC guidelines that don't actually stretch to those on freelance. And it would only stretch to Gary Lineker if he was presenting Match of the Day, and he did so. Which opens up another argument. People are saying, well, Gary Lineker was able to make statements on Qatar's human rights policy during the World Cup on a BBC coverage of the first match of the Qatar World Cup, but he can't make a statement on the human rights policy in his own country, on his own social media, and not on a BBC show. The point really stands is, where's the consistency there from the BBC? If they are so downright really stickler on impartiality and not giving an opinion and not looking biased, then why was Gary Lineker allowed in November to make such a statement and such a big statement on a national channel across the UK to a group to various different opinions on a BBC show. Why was he allowed to do that? And then, a couple of months later, he's not allowed to make something about his own country, which he lives in, which he has a right to do, as he is a voter in that country, and has a right to an opinion. Why is he not allowed to do that on his personal social media account that has no links whatsoever to the BBC? That's the real question here, is where is the consistency from the BBC's point of view? There isn't one. That's the simple, the long and short of it. There is no consistency there. And when you know the whole backstory about the bigger bosses at the BBC, the fact that Richard Sharp helped the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson get an £800,000 loan, and then the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson made him chairman of the BBC, the fact that the Director General of the BBC was once run in a local election for the Conservative Party really makes you beg the question. The two biggest bosses at the BBC have more than likely made this decision on Gary Lineker when they have their own ties to the Conservative Party. When Gary Lineker is not actually speaking in a negative way about the government's policy, of which the Conservative Party are the government, by the way. So this is the whole thing. There's no real actual ground for the BBC to stand on here because they've no really way of arguing it. He's not a BBC employee. There's all these things that go for Gary Lineker, plus the public opinion kind of thing. The public are more or less behind him because he's got the ability of free speech, and that's the whole point of view. It's why is Gary Lineker not allowed to share his personal opinion on a personal social media account? That's really the crux of the issue, and I don't understand why. I really don't understand why he has been somewhat silenced by the BBC or illegitimized by the BBC by trying to use their platform to say Gary Lineker was wrong in saying this and we don't agree with this. That's totally fine. You can say that you don't agree with it and that his views do not represent the BBC, but do not say that he's being pulled from BBC shows because he doesn't represent your views. That's ridiculous. The whole point of democracy and the whole point of having the BBC is to share all opinions and views, whether they're legitimate or not. The whole point is that the BBC holds that platform for people to share their opinions and share whatever their views are, and you gather that, take that out as public opinion, and then produce the facts. But the facts of the matter is, this is the question, this is the big thing. The facts are that the United Nations has criticised the UK government's policy. So if the United Nations can do it, and the United Nations are probably a pretty reliable source when it comes to human rights, that Gary Lineker has done it in a similar kind of way. He's gone a bit hyperbolic. Nice word. Hyperbolic in terms of 1930s Germany, but he's factually correct. There's nothing factually incorrect about that. So the BBC really have put their foot in it, and a lot of people aren't happy this weekend about this. And as it stands at 1 o'clock on Sunday, the 12th of March, at the minute, there's still a lot of nothing really. Nothing really is going for the BBC. They've lost a lot of commentary. They didn't have any of their normal Premier League commentary yesterday on the Saturday games. They didn't have Final Score, one of their big shows where they have the goals and the scores as they come in, and they didn't have Match of the Day as it normally would. No punditry, no presenters, just a 20-minute show, barely a 20-minute show with nothing but highlights that you can get on YouTube channels from Sky Sports or BT Sport or whatever. The BBC have really been hit hard this weekend, and rightfully so. And from my personal opinion, I stand by Gary Lineker, and I would stand behind him in this whole situation. He has a right to say what he wants to say. He hasn't crossed the line. He hasn't gone extreme with it. He hasn't said something derogatory or offensive or anything that would cause distress. He has stated a factual point. He has shared it on a social media account that has no links to the company that he would work for on a Saturday night. And he has total right to do so, in my personal opinion, and a lot of people's personal opinions, that is, including his former presenters or his colleagues and presenters and pundits that work on the BBC as well. It's the BBC that are big losers in this one. And that's the big story. It's absolutely fabulous. It's fantastic. Really, really interesting what we've seen this weekend. And it's really just exploded from Friday right until now. And it'll be massively interesting to see what will be coming next, because we've got another day of Premier League football today where there's no commentary. It's probably world feed coverage, which isn't owned by the BBC, but the BBC can use it. They don't have any presenters for their Women's Super League coverage of Chelsea v Manchester United. That's currently on the way at the minute. There's no presenters, no pundits, nothing on that. It's just no reporters, no nothing, just a world feed of commentary, and nothing else. This is a huge thing, and it'll be interesting to see what the final outcome of this is, because there is still no resolution to this. And I don't know how long this will go on for, or how long this could take to resolve, but a lot of people were saying, could this be the end? Could that have been the end of Gary Lineker hosting Match of the Day on the BBC? It could be the end, and who knows what the future's going to be if this isn't resolved by next weekend. Are we going to see a boycotting of the BBC once again by its staff, by its reporters and presenters and its pundits? Or are we going to see a real stepping back of this and saying, we're going to take 1 week, say we support Gary, but we need to continue with our jobs? It'll be an interesting point of view to see what way they're going to handle this, but from all angles. What the BBC are going to do, what obviously the reporters, presenters, pundits, etc. are going to do about this. And of course, I'm going to keep you updated, of course. On next week's show, I'll be doing a quick summary of this, saying what we're going to do, seeing what's happened, summing up the whole week and the current impact and everything from that. And we'll have another big story to talk about. We'll see what we can get. I'm going to see if this works. And if it is, if you enjoy this, like, subscribe, comment. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Turn on notifications as well. Don't forget, this is a totally new thing. I've never done anything like this before, and it will be totally interesting to see what you make of it. So thank you very much indeed for listening, and support to Gary Lineker. I have personal support for Gary Lineker, and I think he has the right to say what he wants on his personal social media without facing backlash from the BBC. But that's the big story of the week. That's been the huge story that has been dominating the world of football in the UK this whole weekend, and it'll be interesting to see what happens next. We'll update you on all of this and everything that's happened, the whole saga, on next week's show. But thank you very much for watching. This has been the LFS podcast with me, Caoimhan Ferris. Thank you very much indeed.